Hello and welcome back to another episode of Getting into Good Oxide. Welcome back, Sydney.
Hello.
And we already got started before we could hit the recording button. This is why you see all this green stuff here. And maybe that's good because this saved a lot of time and you'll just catch up maybe as we continue implementing this. But just to show what we are doing, we are now doing this part here, the short ID part. Maybe Sydney, you can explain what this is supposed to do.
Yeah, so the goal here is to receive a full object ID in a given hex length, and just to shorten that down to ideally that hex length, or at least to the least amount of length that is not ambiguous.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
So if I use this as an example here, so it's exactly that function, or this command that we're implementing essentially. Given some ID, which could be in this case just symbolic head, and a hex length 7, give me that ID and shorten it to that amount of characters. But we can't really show here is that if this would be too short, it would actually give you more characters than you provided in order to make it unambiguous. And that's the trick here. And that's all it does. And all the machinery that we built so far is really just for that one capability, to be able to say, no, I don't use 4 characters, I use 5. Like this is what we do here.
Exactly.
And instead of short ID, we named it to disambiguate prefix, because we kind of are stuck with that term for lack of a better one. So prefix seemed good on this level as a name for what it is. And yeah, because these prefixes have a validated hex length that is in bounds, so it's more than 4 and less than or equal to the hex length of the ID that is stored in here. That validation has to come from somewhere. This is why we made up a new type. Sydney found that name, which is potential prefix, which is a pretty awesome name, I think. And it really is kind of the same, except for this is the ID, the original ID that we provided as input along with the validated hex length. And this allows us here to really just, to know that the hex length is in bounds, and we can work with that relatively natively, because now we can just boil things down to what we actually are doing here. And all we do is look up the prefix until it's unambiguous and increase the hex length by 1 until it is non-ambiguous, and that's all. Which also means, by the way, let's fix these compiler errors. I think that's the thing. I just have an idea for a new test that we didn't write yet that we should definitely have. Okay, and now back to business. To prefix not found. To prefix starts at self and returns a git hash prefix. Oh, that's interesting. I mean, it's okay. We can
I'll try it.
Yeah, we go with this again. And we know it can't fail. I think that's the thing. That's the special thing. But it has to check it. We don't have a hidden API or an unsafe API or we don't have a new unchecked. We don't have that. We could, but we don't. So
right.
It will check again, and we provide ID as input and the hex length, and we expect our hex length to always And interesting. And you see, this is exactly what we would save if we would have some unchecked constructor that just trusts us. And I would have that totally if you would have some sort of private API, which we could have if you would be in the same crate. If you would be living, I mean, if potential prefix would be in git hash prefix, sorry, in git hash, then crate internal APIs could exist. But we don't have that. But it's okay, I think. But it could be an indicator that maybe potential prefix kind of wants to live in git hash, and maybe we move it there. For now, the only use is here, so I think maybe it just stays here, and we live with.
Yeah, I mean, that's again just I guess a bit more explicit, but that's not actually bad thing.
Yeah, I think it's okay. Transform ourselves into a prefix with our current hex length. And this kind of implies that this can change here. And that's a special thing, I guess. Okay, to prefix looks sensible. I think would work as we would expect. And now, right, we get a value here, we ignore that, and convert ourselves to prefix. Then what's this? Oh, yeah, right, into. And now change the call sites. For the first time, you have to create this potential prefix. New ID and hex lang, and then I think I usually go with unwrap here, and later replace that with a question mark. Yeah, cool. That's our call. And the same here. Fine. New null 7 unwrap. Okay. Call it maybe. And there we go. Yeah, our tests are green. Everything works just as expected. Huh. Okay, fine. I take it. So it just said I have an idea for another test. And guess what? I just forgot it, kind of. The test was obvious, but now I don't know it anymore.
It had something to do with the potential prefix, right? To prefix method, I'm not sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah, now I remember. No work is done for unambiguous potential prefixes. What I mean is, what about this? So we have this ID, we know this needs a certain length. ID. No, can you import that? It's already imported, just a bit laggy, okay. Disambiguate prefix, now create one. What if we already have 40 hex length here? So we would expect we would expect no work to be done. Refresh size is 0 because it knows it's already unambiguous. It can't be longer than 40. And this is the actual interesting expectation here, I think. The rest is just formality. Unwrap. Unwrap. Potential prefix. And the prefix itself. Oh yeah, this, by the way, copy clone at the very least. Expect. Yeah, let's just go with unwrap. Unwrap here, that's the outer error, and that's the expect that object exists. Cool. And that's now a prefix that is exactly what we would expect here. It takes longer to write than I expected somehow. So that returns a prefix, and that is exactly what we get with potential prefix to prefix. And that is a typo. Yeah, and no work was done. Yeah, and that should fail right now. Oh, interesting. There's no debug implementation for git hash prefix. Git hash prefix does not do many things right now. There's also no debug for this one.
Easy to fix.
Should be. Really, there's no... Okay. Do I usually have debug on these or not? I think I don't. Okay, well, if it's not common, then I don't do it. Yeah, that's a bit... I mean, display is implemented on object IDs at least, but not debug. Okay. Yeah. I think that's an oversight. But I somehow feel, you know, I feel so lazy about it. I feel so bad about it somehow. Is there, I mean, I can do this. Okay. Okay. That's correct. I mean, it fails for exactly the right reason. So if ID hexlang equals ID, yeah, let's call this prefix maybe. Prefix to prefix. Oh, do I have to call it potential prefix? Oh, that's not, I don't like that. So PID kind lang in hex. If that's the max value, so to say, then return okay sum p to prefix. Yeah. that's how the API for that one writes itself, quite literally. Path an ID, that seems to be something you'd want to return an OID. Git hash OID, return our full object ID. Makes sense to make clear it's the full one, not just some prefix or something. Self ID. Okay, and then we also had hex lang. Oh, now it's interesting here. Hex lang or lang and hex? Probably hex lang, because that's also what prefix has, huh? Yeah, prefix also has hex lang.
Yeah, a bit shorter.
Yes. Return the amount of hexes with a set that are desired for the prefix. Okay. Okay, now we can read these fields. Hey, it still fails. Because of non-reachable indices.
Now everything is 0.
So we have to provide, I think, yeah, the number should be 2 there, I suppose. This. But open reachable is 0. Known reachable is also 0 because it didn't actually refresh at all.
Yeah, we need like default metrics, right? Everything is uninitialized basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess then we better do it ourselves here. Oh. Fine. But it's worth it, I think. Maybe it is, maybe not. Handles, does this implement default? It does not, but it could. Or does it implement it elsewhere? No, I don't think so. So now we can say num handles 1, and the unused slots 32, and the rest default. And I think that's okay. And then this can be put where it belongs. There's still some
equal syntax actually.
Yeah. Default calls metrics default. And just sets all the other fields to whatever the default value is. Yeah. That works. Cool syntax, like a spread operator. And it works. Cool. Yeah, it's kind of a super silly optimization somehow. I mean, how often does that actually kick in? And you pay for it in a way by doing this extra. I mean, this extra check costs nothing. This is nothing to worry about. What? What's going on? Okay. Okay. Yeah. And now for the disambiguation. So we already check the entire object database here and call that 143 times in this test. And now for the last one. The one with the actual ambiguity. This one. returns some error for... No, actually it doesn't.
It's a longer
Returns,
prefix.
yeah, disambiguated. It actually does what it claims it does. Disambiguated prefixes when needed. Something like that. Okay, so here we have our ID and we pass in 4. Disambiguate prefix, unwrap, expect. Yeah. I'm always kind of forgetting result option. So unwrap and then should exist. And that's the prefix. We can probably just take it and do individual assert equals and write something. So prefix dot hexlang. Ah, right.
Central prefix.
Yes. Yeah, type safety. For unwrap. I don't know why it doesn't get that here. It's like it doesn't know what this is. Okay, fair enough, whatever. And that is now 5. The hexlang was increased to disambiguate. And just to be sure,
right,
as always, a bit paranoid, comp OID. The OID must be, the prefix must be matching that OID that we passed in, just to be sure. Deordering equal. Okay. So, let's see what it says about this. So this should fail now, huh? With the 4.
Yeah, and I also think the metrics, because we don't set the refresh mode here, right?
Yeah. Yeah, the metric, I mean, that might be different. Let's see.
Okay.
We asked twice, and since, yeah, we should know. We asked twice, so 2 times it hits the end. Maybe even, 2 times. Or 3 times. I think it's 3. The first time it initializes 1 refresh. Then it hits the end for the first lookup. And then you look up again because you have to increase the hex length. And you hit all 2 indices. So 3, 2, that's my guess.
Right. Okay.
Ah, and here this is also wrong as expected. Right. So that's the max hexlang. While our current hexlang isn't the max hexlang. Do stuff. And since you make it unambiguous, we never have the unambiguous case. We know that too. So we have to store oh yeah, right, and we mutate this potential prefix here. That's how I would do it. So we increase the hexlang in there, always ask for a new prefix. And If there's a hard error, we always bail out, that's okay. And now the rest, that's the interesting thing. So that can be, yeah, if it's a none,
we ignore it, right?
yes. I just realized there's a bug in here already. Like this previous thing, that doesn't actually check if the object is in there, right? Because don't do any work.
Oh, so you should, yeah, okay, true. So you do have to scan through once anyway, just to check that the object's actually there.
Yeah. So we can have two cases, like this is the early bailout and we just make a lookup of the full ID, by the way. And that might mean that we don't have to load, that we don't have to do all the work. Yeah. So let's see, P ID self contains. So if we contain that ID, is that that can't fail right now. That's good, because then we can say then P2 prefix. Yeah, I think that's the new logic. It's just this intermediate check here, and that's as fast as it goes. This means we now broke one test, which is this one. No way. Where's the no work? Oh, no work is done. Early bailout here. Known reachable indices would now be 1, because I think that object was in the first one and not the second one. No, known is 2 because we actually do a refresh. One refresh gives us 2 known indices, and we have open reachable indices, which is 1. And that's the new thing, I think. And I know that because we used this one particular object which already gave us this kind of index thing here. Yeah. Yeah, anyway, that's just a guess. Would of course be nice to have a red test here, but that could be the fix. Yeah. Okay, now I feel better about this one here. Because here we do the lookup, and now we always do a lookup because we know it's not equal to maxling yet. And then if you don't have it at all, that's our one lookup that we do. We definitely bail out. Okay, none. And if you have some ambiguous one, we just continue, huh? We try, oh.
We
increment.
have to increment the hex length, right?
Yeah, I get a new prefix, P increment hex length. And that can be implemented so that it's, you know, never overflowing or never giving us hex lengths that are too large or something like that.
Exactly.
So we increment the hex length and we continue. And if you get the good stuff, okay, that's the ID. Then we know we can return, which probably is this. Yeah, we know it's some ID. So, okay, some P2 prefix. and it doesn't like it because what? Maybe the wrong return type here. Result option. Okay. Oh, and the syntax error. Ah, yeah, right. Doesn't even recognize the sum. What's up with that? Also,
Error. Parenthesis is missing.
Really? Again? Here. Yes.
Yeah.
That's better. Still,
Oh.
man. Mismatch types. Let's fix this first. Try adding an expression at the end of the block. At the end of the block in 55. Ah, yeah, right. This is not a loop. This is, we don't necessarily get in here. And it doesn't know that. Like it can't get in here, right? We know it's not max length. But the compiler doesn't know that.
Oh, so you...
So here we go with unreachable. We handle the case of hex length being the full hash length.
You could also do an else statement, I guess, right? If else, and then it would know.
No, I mean you could, but it wouldn't change the fact that you had to have to provide something here.
Okay.
Always. And let's double check that this actually makes sense. So if it is hexlang, then early bailout after checking that it's existing. Otherwise, keep incrementing stuff. Cool. That could work. Early bailout without doing any real work except for a context check. Okay. Now let's give it that method and then it's probably already working. To prefix. Then, yeah, so you see it's really just what we need and nothing else. It's very, very specific, but I think that that's fine. Yeah. So it's also the question how public should stuff be here, because all these, like, people only use new here and nothing else. Like everything else can be create private. So this can be pub create. This can be pub create. This as well. Yeah. Because you only create this for that particular reason, you know. And I'd rather have less public API to not, you know, to make this less useful, this type. Shouldn't be used anywhere else, I think. Increment hexlang. Yeah, that's all it does. And it's Mata. Okay. Yeah, so that must have felt like a cut here because we hit the pause button. And in the meantime, we just implemented everything, which didn't take too long. And yeah, what's cool is that this thing is actually working. I think the highlight here would be, where is it? Where's what we just did?
Ambiguous case. Oh, it actually has to disambiguate.
Yeah, this one, yeah. Because this number, we know it's ambiguous for 4 characters. And it should give us one more than that. And it does. And that shows that it's working. And the implementation is here. the final implementation. And I think what changed since you last looked at this is that we now also validate the ID that is provided so that we don't just return IDs unchecked and say, yes, that's cool. But we only return IDs, full, even if it's full IDs, that are valid or that are contained in our object database. And that wasn't there before. You could just give it a null ID and pass it in and would just return it unchanged. Which I think is what libgit2 does, by the way. I think they just say, oh, no work to be done here. But technically, there is work to be done. I don't want to say anything wrong. Maybe I misremember. That can be. But I thought, since this is kind of a step 2 that we took, it's easy to kind of be fooled by simplicity that isn't there. It's not actually that trivial, if you want to maintain the contract that you have with the outside world that says this is none if the ID if the object couldn't be found, and it's easy to forget. But we didn't, and I think this also looks neat, with the Boolean here, and then you upgrade to an option and just put the prefix in there, and that composes so well. Yeah, and then this loop here, that was also tricky. Given that once we reach the max length, we actually have to return the then definitely existing object, because if it doesn't exist, we bail out right away. If it's ambiguous, we increase the hex length and try again. And otherwise, if it's unambiguous, we return the prefix with the hex length that is in there right now. And yeah, as the last thing, we made private all the little utilities that are not used in the tests, and that are really just ours. So we get away with less documentation and basically keeping things simpler, just a bunch of assertions there, because we know we should always use it correctly, and that's a little insurance against that. But that's as good as it gets. Also, debug assert only runs in test mode if it's compiled without optimization, essentially. So that's not in the production build here, because our tests should uncover that. That's the idea. That's why debug assert. If you're unsure about that, keep it in assert.
Put it on assert.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't really have a test that runs into this case, right?
No. We don't have a test that actually would ramp up the hex length to that amount. So you're suggesting make it assert and play it safe.
Yes, maybe.
I like that suggestion, because I think it's correct. My monkey mind wanted to say, yeah, but that costs you. You can't afford that. You can't afford to compare two numbers. That's 8 bytes per number. That's usize on a 64-bit system. Yeah, it's okay, I think. It's okay, we can do that. Yeah, and in total we have, how many tests? I think 4 for this. One more than for the other one, because we specifically test the case for no work. Store, dynamic, ID to prefix. Ha! Found a bug.
Last thing.
They lurk everywhere. Disambiguate prefix, right. And I think that with pride means we can tick that box.
Yeah, that is almost the last piece of at least the Bergen puzzle, right? I mean, I guess there's a bit more when it comes to short ID, but yeah, to get back to the Bergen,
yeah,
this should be everything, almost.
Good that you said almost. Yeah, once we move this up one level, and we already sketched the API for that, right? So it's probably going to be pretty neat. We can put that into Bergen, but I think there is this thing here. Commit name. So tag plus short hash. So this is essentially an implementation of git name ref. And name only, no object names. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, something like this, I think. It can also always, all. Okay, not both. And it doesn't do that either. Okay. Yeah, I thought it could also give you something with a short ID somewhere. But yeah, something like that. We have to implement, find a name for an ID based on proximity of tags and branches, and maybe even with a short ID. But I don't see that here right now, but something like that. Okay, cool. So that could be some work, but we'll get there. We'll take it. Cool. Then thanks a lot for watching, and see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.